What's going on, Los Angeles? Welcome into the LA Football Show. Little LAFB Live after dark. Had to wait for that UCLA basketball game to wrap up as we're LA. So it's the LA Sports, but we're in here talking little Rams. We'll probably touch on a little Chargers tonight as well. But happy to have you all joining us, joining me tonight. Two of the best dudes on the LA Football Network. We'll start with Jamal, host of Draft is in session. My man, what's going on? How you doing?
Ride or die. Happy to be joining the weekly sesh here. I know I missed the first two, but excited to partake in round three.
Yeah, glad to have you. I know you have some great thoughts on what went down today, so excited to get into it. What you haven't been sitting in this location before? Is this a little like man cave you got behind
This
you?
is so I my parents. So I'm at my parents' house, and this is my old room in my parents' house. So this is sort of my original man cave. So
okay, the original bachelor pad.
The original bachelor pad. You got all the Laker memorabilia, all the basketball memorabilia hanging on the walls because it's all about sports with me. First love.
That's commitment, bro. You went over to the parents' house to watch the UCLA game, and now you're jumping on a show with us. So, so thank you. Appreciate it. And down below me, we were together just a few hours ago, giving our immediate reaction. Skinny T, Ryan Anderson, beat writer for the Rams. What's up, my man? Good evening.
Good. Repping the Bobby Trees shirt once again. There's talks about him. We'll get into that for sure. But yeah.
Crazy. I know I got my Our City, Our Network shirt on. So my wife always jokes with me because my entire wardrobe is LA football, like network clothing. And she's like, that's literally all you wear is like, and I'm like, I gotta be on brand. Gotta always be on brand. So, it is what it is. But, before we get into it, real quick, Jamal, UCLA game. I mean, I picked them to win the whole thing, and I know this is a football pod, but this is LA. We can talk a little UCLA quickly. I mean, hey, they pulled it out, but how are you feeling?
I finally have a feeling back in my extremities. That was really tough. Down 8 with 6 minutes to go. They were down the whole game, and couldn't hit a shot. And some of our buddies like Mike Regalado and Sam Connon, who are kind of our UCLA kind of comrades. On the football side, they also cover basketball, so I was following them on Twitter, and it was so interesting because Kentucky went out early with losing a shocker to St. Peter's, and everybody was so excited. It's like, hey, there's a road here to get back to the Final Four and have the rematch with the Zags, and 45 minutes later, we're like, oh my God, we're going to be the next victim. I mean, it was looking bleak there, but they showed kind of championship resolve, and thank God, because Mick Cronin just signed a 6-year contract extension today, made him the highest paid coach in the Pac-12. He's basically the Lincoln Riley equivalent now of Pac-12 basketball, and that would have been a heck of a way to christen the new contract. Is go out and lose to 13 seeded Akron. Thrilled to just survive in advance.
Yeah, LeBron was probably in the house rooting for Akron, even though he's a Laker.
A Laker for 14 more months, probably.
Yeah, that's a whole different story.
Yeah,
so,
exactly.
But I love how the NFL. Here we are, day 1 of March Madness, day 2 of March Madness coming up, and the NFL. I mean, can you guys remember a crazier free agency period? Like, there's always the big name signings, but Ryan, I can't remember this many like trades going down. What's happening? And we'll get to the big one, which is Davante Adams. We'll get to that later on, but I think it's been nuts.
Yeah, I think the Rams have kind of taught the NFL how to do this stuff, which is go big and pick up these these big name guys. And wow.
Yeah. I mean,
Davante Adams, it's just insane.
Crazy. You get the Chargers trading for Khalil Mack just a few days ago last week, and now Davante Adams and Deshaun Watson news is going to break here probably at any point, hopefully, so we can stop talking about it or hearing about it, that is. So, but let's start with the Rams because this will be a fun conversation because I think Jamal's on the different side of this. Ryan and I talked earlier today. So for those that don't know, obviously everyone knows probably, but Allen Robinson signing with the Rams, 3-year deal. Worth $45 million, about $30 million guarantees. I don't think the official cap hits have come out because I'm sure they'll be structured differently year in and year out. But Allen Robinson adding to the receiving core, a big pivot after missing out on Von Miller, and now pivot to add to the wide receiver core and the offensive firepower. Before I throw it to Jamal, just Adam Schefter tweeted out just 30 minutes ago, And we talked about this earlier, and there was a lot of talk and speculation anyway, but he tweeted out, after signing Allen Robinson today, the Rams began receiving calls about the availability of Robert Woods, who is now a prime trade candidate per league sources. Woods expected to be ready by training camp. So with that info, and then just with your own personal opinion, Jamal, what was your thoughts, or what was, I guess, your thought at the time of the signing, and have you shifted at all, or are you still in the same belief?
Well, Ryan, let me the Ryans. You guys need your own show. Just call it the Ryans. But let me start by saying, look, Skinny T, you are the Rams expert. You know more Rams than I do, and Mr. Dairud, you're the godfather of the LA Football Network. So the humble servant of sort of college football that I am coming in here. So I recognize where I stand on the totem pole of expertise in this particular.
Oh, stop! No.
You're smarter than both of us.
Yeah.
But my initial reaction was this was a combination of utter stupidity and a lack of self-awareness. That is my take, and it was sort of emotional at the time that it happened, and a couple hours have gone by, and obviously the emotion's worn out, but the sentiment remains the same. For the life of me, this was the dumbest thing I've seen the Rams do, and frankly, they're at a D- in terms of their grade in free agency at this point. And the reason I say that is, I think setting the stage here, the Rams obviously, what an incredible run, Super Bowl champions. But I think if you're Les Snead, you sort of have to be objective about, how did that season end? And while the Rams are Super Bowl champions, no one is going to confuse this team with the dominant Patriots teams, the dominant Legion of Boom teams, the dominant Patrick Mahomes teams, so the Kansas City Chiefs, where you had a dominant run in the regular season, you were dominant in the playoffs, maybe had a close game, and all you need to do is run it back. This was a team that went 12-5 in the regular season and won 3 consecutive 3-point games in the playoffs. Like, if Stafford's fumble in the fourth quarter against the Bucs doesn't bounce right back to and bounces to the left, the Rams are out in the divisional, and the whole narrative all offseason is that this was one of the biggest choke jobs since the Houston Oilers coughed it up to the Buffalo Bills in the early 90s. If Aaron Donald doesn't get to Burrow in the time that he did on that final fourth down play, Jamar Chase is wide open, and all the talk this offseason would be that Jalen Ramsey would probably have to be wearing hoodies and sunglasses and fake mustaches all summer in LA, because it would be a LeBron 2011-esque choke job. I mean, he was an absolute bum in that game. And so when you sort of look at how you ended up getting the end of the season, this is not just it's a run it back plus. Phase one is we got to run it back, but just running it back is not good enough because the margin for error of the victory to a Super Bowl title was so small that even if you run it back and the teams around you get better, that's not going to be good enough. And so phase one of the offseason strategy needed to be, let's bring our core back. And then phase two is now let's find a way to enhance that core by adding to the core or adding pieces around the core. And for me, you have to sort of take a step back and say, who won you the Super Bowl? The 2 guys that won you the Super Bowl were Cooper Kupp and Aaron Donald. And everybody else rode those 2 guys as coattails to victory. And Stafford tried his best not to screw it up. And guys like Cam Akers and Jalen Ramsey tried their best to screw it up. And they still got the win. So ultimately, you have to say, what are my 2 pillar pieces here? Kupp and Donald. What do they want? Kupp doesn't really want anything. He's good. He's chilling. Okay, great. What does Donald want? Donald wants Von Miller to come back. And for the life of me, I don't understand how you can let this guy walk one day and then the next day come back and sign Allen Robinson. Look, the 6-year, $120 million deal with the Bills is irrelevant. It's all about guaranteed money in the NFL. He had $32 million on signing, and he's got another $18 million guaranteed coming his way over the course of the contract. And now you turn over 6 years, and now you turn around and you give Allen Robinson $30 million guaranteed over 3 years. Why can't you go to Von Miller and say 3 years, 50, all guaranteed? Let's get this thing done because of what Von Miller has meant to this franchise. I mean, if you see Aaron Donald's leadership ability, his desire, his on the field ability is unparalleled. But what he was in the locker room when you add Von Miller really put this team over the top. And especially when you talk about losing Whitworth and such a great leader on this team, you needed that even more. And Les Snead, it just shows a tremendous amount of disrespect to not understanding who got you there. And this is sort of the classic case of GMs thinking that they're so smart. And for the life of me, I don't understand these Rams fans who think Les Snead is some intelligent guy. He's been a 15-year pro scout languishing with the Atlanta Falcons. He's been the Rams GM for 10 years. Tell me how the first 6 years of that tenure went. The Rams were a doormat in the NFL. And he signs McVay. He has the opportunity to go all in. He just trades the picks, goes all in. That's not intelligence. That's courage. I'm going to give him credit for that. And he did an outstanding job there. But there's a difference between intelligent and courage. And he's not exhibiting a lot of intelligence here. This reminds me a lot of Jerry Jones in the mid-90s when he essentially broke up the Cowboys because of ego, because he thought he had more of a say and he was more of the reason why the Cowboys were successful. And guess what? It's been nearly 30 years since they've gone back. And this is an utter lack of understanding of the fact that who got you there. And then the second piece is, what's your window? The fact of the matter is that the way McVay has talked, the way Donald is still talking, no one is talking about the fact that Donald has not made a decision yet about next year. The way they talked at the end of this season, you have to think there's probably a 3-year window here left, okay, about that. So let's go all in on the 3 years. Give these guys what they want, run it back, and let's move forward. But now you're in a position where if this is the tipping point that enables Donald to say, you know what, it was a great run. I'm at the top of the sport. Witt's not coming back. Okay, my guy Vaughn's not coming back. Josina Anderson cracked a story earlier today where she messaged Aaron Donald, and he said, you know, I'm kind of leaning. I don't know what to make of this right now. And if that signing ultimately led to Aaron Donald retiring, I told this in the chat earlier, if that domino sort of falls, this makes the Christian Kirk contract with the Jacksonville Jaguars look like executive of the year material. I can't understand for the life of me what these guys are thinking because, of course we need a fifth receiver. I mean, what the hell? You have the best receiver in the sport. You have Van Jefferson. Woods is going to be ready for the start of the season. Yeah, you run 11 formation. You got your 3 receivers. So what else? What, a 4th receiver? You're going to let Vaughn go, jeopardize the core for a 4th receiver for a guy that played hurt last year, had one of his worst seasons of his career. And then I'm hearing all these other stories about, they're going to sign and trade and parlay this for Hunter of the Vikings. Well, you know what? Guess what? If you're going to sign and trade, why didn't that sign and trade happen already? And frankly, if you were going to buy a receiver to just go trade another receiver to get a pass rusher, why don't you just get the pass rusher that Aaron Donald wants in the first place, as opposed to a guy like Hunter who's played 7 games over the last 2 years? For the life of me, I don't understand this at all.
All right. Jamal going in on it. All right. Well, we got to peel it back because I hear you. I just don't agree with you. And that's fine. That's fine. You're a smart dude. I mean, the beginning points of all the luck and what happened with the Rams, we could play that game all day with every team. I mean, Brady in every Super Bowl has had so many things go his way, and obviously he's the greatest. And so, but the Bengals wouldn't be there if Ryan Tannehill didn't throw 3 interceptions. And we could play that game for every team all day. Last year, the Buccaneers playing against the Saints and Drew Brees throws 3 picks, and they barely beat Washington, a 7-win team, but they get by. So
Bucks beat the Chiefs by 22. The Legion of Boom team blew the doors off of Peyton by 35, basically shut him out 43-0. So I'm not saying there aren't lucky moments. But 3 straight 3-point games is kind of like the Giants of 2011, the Ravens of 2012. No one is going to remember this Rams team as a historic champion. We'll remember them as champions
I'll give you that.
In history. No one's going to be confusing this team with any word like dominance or some team that is sort of in the annals of NFL history. Let's not get it twisted.
Yeah. No, I hear that. I agree with that. Yeah, totally agree with that. I just think you could play that luck card with a lot of, I mean, of the 56 champions, you could probably play that with 50 of them or 45 of them, and then you have your 6 to 7 dominant teams. But, in terms of the Von Miller, this is unless we're in the room, because I hear you absolutely, especially when you see the figure of it was 45 million guaranteed at signing for Von, 52 total guaranteed, and Allen Robinson is right now all we know is 30 guaranteed. We don't know how much at signing. We don't know how much in the first year. I mean, I get that it's like, how do they not get it done? When I talked yesterday about the move, when you look at the total number, the Rams were never going to be able to pay 20 million a year, which it comes down to. But again, who knows what the cap hit is going to be when it comes to the Buffalo Bills? And maybe it is different, Jamal. Maybe it is, how do they not get that done? But if it's a 20 million cap hit this year, the Rams could not do that. There was no way they could afford that. But I think they were in and they were close. I mean, we heard from Jordan Rodriguez, we heard from multiple other Rams reporters that the deal was close. The Rams were right there pushing on top of it. Ultimately, Von went with a little bit more money with Buffalo. So then they completely shifted and pivoted. I don't think it was ever a thought of they wanted also Allen Robinson. Now it is interesting. I think it is a bizarre pivot. I don't hate it as much because I think they add strength to what they already have. We saw in the Super Bowl where on that last drive, they literally had Cooper Kupp and a bunch of no names. I mean, not Van Jefferson's not a no name, but Van Jefferson, Ben Skowronek.
The ball to Cooper Kupp. Nobody gives a shit who your number 3 wide receiver is in crunch time. The biggest misnomer in sports is that you need depth in the playoffs. No, you need star power in the playoffs. You need depth.
And Allen Robinson could be a star.
The stars are fresh in the playoffs.
Yeah, and Allen Robinson could be a star. He's a top 20 receiver, yeah? Would you say that?
No.
Not based top 20
on his performance last year.
Well, I mean, he had Andy Dalton and a rookie and Justin Fields throwing the football. And before that, he had Blake Bortles throwing in the football. So I think if you can get 1,000 yards receiving with Mitchell Trubisky and Blake Bortles, you're a pretty good receiver.
Is he one of those NBA players who's just a 20-point scorer on a bad team? Is he just kind of Kevin Love, where, when you put him on a contender, his stats go way down? Or are you giving him credit for getting yards despite bad quarterback play? I mean, when you're getting your doors blown off and getting blown out week in and week out, there's a lot of garbage yards in the second half of games and fourth quarters of games when you're a bad team. So how many of those yards are impact yards and how many of those yards just make, kind of fantasy football folks happy, So
yeah, I don't think Allen Robinson was that, though.
It's a lazy argument to say, he's had 3,000-yard receiving seasons in 6 years. Well, what's the impact? What's the impact?
Well, he had pretty good impact, especially on their AFC Championship close team when they went to the AFC Championship. I mean, I don't think he was just a garbage time receiver. He wasn't a, Kenny Galladay in Detroit or something. But Ryan, what's your take on this?
Well, I think a lot of Jamal's points are taking some hypotheticals. If Aaron Donald decides to walk away, if the Rams can't make it to the playoffs again, this move is going to look really bad. There's a lot of ifs there, but you can look at the ifs on the other side where they do turn, Van Jefferson into Danielle Hunter or a cornerback or something like that and strengthen their defense from that. There's ifs on both sides, and I would argue that you could that the Rams could come away from this with a better team, having improved on that. And heading into an NFC that's not going to be as good as it was last year, and an NFC West that's arguably going to be quite a bit easier too. So, I mean, I think that the Rams can come out of this with a pretty good stacked deck in their hand. And I 100% agree with Ryan that I think every Super Bowl winning team has probably had quite a bit of luck that's allowed them to get there. And I think that, I think you're taking a lot away from Les Snead and what he has done. I think he's gotten better. He spent the first 6 years maybe having a hard time, but I think he's learned a lot. He's not making the same mistakes that he was making early on, even with like the Goff and Gurley contracts. So I think he's learned, and I think he's gotten better. And I think that they've proved, obviously, with the Super Bowl winning roster, that he can build a team, and Tony Pastores can manipulate these contracts to get underneath the cap, make this money work. So I think that where we stand today, it can go either way. Obviously, if this causes Aaron Donald to
yeah, then we're all on Jamal's side, and this is the worst thing ever.
Yeah. Allen Robinson,
Ryan, let me go quick on that right now. So yeah, I mean, I get it. You know, if ifs and nuts were, you know, sort of, you know, candy and nuts or whatever the saying is. So let's talk reality today. So today, the defensive line is worse, and you have a fourth wide receiver that you don't need. So in what universe are the Rams better today than they were 4 weeks ago when they won the Super Bowl?
No, it's fair.
I wouldn't argue that. I wouldn't argue that they're better today.
So that's
you have to
minus in the offseason right now, today.
Yeah. I don't disagree with that. I just don't think this is a horrible sign. Here's the thing, Jamal, and I don't think there's any way they go into training camp with all of these receivers on their roster. I think this was a move planned to do something else. And we see the tweet about people interested in Robert Woods. Julio, I want to just give him credit here. Thanks for joining the show. But he said this, and it's kind of interesting to think about. I don't think this is necessarily what the thought, but Woods and Stafford never really seemed to be on the same page even before he was hurt. Like, he was very inconsistent. He wasn't nearly as involved as Cooper Kupp. Maybe it was in a sense of them saying, let's go get a jump ball guy like Allen Robinson who brings something different, because Woods and Kupp are kind of similar. Kupp is obviously the star, but they're similar style receivers. Maybe it was a thought like Allen Robinson is a very different style receiver. Now we can move on from Woods, as painful as that is to say, because we love trees and he's such a strong leader and he's tremendous in the run game and blocking. But that was maybe the thought process. We can move him and add something else, another piece we need. So again, all ifs, because if they don't do this, but I just can't see them going into camp with, I mean, essentially, what is it? 5 receivers right now that are starting quality when you have Kupp, Woods, and that's if they bring OBJ back too, which who knows if that's going to happen. So I don't know. I don't absolutely love it, but I definitely don't hate it. I think it's an interesting pivot point from where we were yesterday. And now we got to see what else they do. If they do nothing else, obviously, then Jamal, I think they get an F in free agency if they do nothing else. But if they are able to counter and bring other in pieces, and then this was one of those pieces, then we can readdress. But I mean, I get everything you're saying.
And I think Allen Robinson's going to be a better wide receiver in this in McVay's offense. He hasn't played in any great offensive schemes by any means, so that's going to help out. And we saw what Stafford did to Kupp. I mean, Kupp has always been a fantastic receiver, but he had an historic season this last season, which he had never touched before. So I think that getting him into a wonderful place to mature and grow. He's not mature and grow, but like
utilize his skills more.
The Rams are a great place for players to develop, explode, you know, just in general. And then McVay's offense, Stafford, I think he's going to be better than we have ever seen him before. I think he's going to have a career year.
Yeah. What does he have before? 1,400 yards is his highest total, I think. He's had 3,000 yard years. Jamal, what do you want to see them do from here? I mean, what we talked earlier about positions we think, and I don't need to put you on the spot of specific players, but for you to say, okay, I can see them turning this around, making it better. What is your biggest need? Because, you know, obviously losing Vaughn is big, but we can argue, and I'm not going to say we are, but we can argue that they do still have talent at pass rush. They don't have Von Miller. But before they got Von Miller, they were number 1 in the NFL in sacks. So it's not like they were struggling in that department.
And not looking like a playoff team. So, you know, this is where advanced stats, like, you know, we can go reference advanced stats all we want. But the reality of the situation is before Von Miller showed up, this was sort of a fringe playoff team that everyone was wondering what the hell's going on here.
Well,
you know,
real quick.
Sack in the end zone and throwing interceptions to the Titans and looking scared.
Real quick. Hang on.
Really soft.
Hang on, I don't want to cut you up, but before Von Miller, they were actually, I think, 7-2. When they got Von Miller is when they went on that 3-game losing streak. So technically, they were actually fine before, and then he didn't necessarily solve any. I think there were issues brewing, and that's why what you're saying is, you know, Von Miller aided to that. But technically, before him, they were actually fine record-wise.
It takes a little bit of time to sort of adjust to a scheme as well. And I mean, they were getting beat up by the Niners, not because of things that necessarily that were Von Miller related. That was more of kind of a lack of offensive and defensive toughness at the lines in some of those games against the Titans and the Niners and so forth. You know, Ryan, for me, it's you have to sort of now find the counter to Aaron Donald and set him up for success. I mean, he doesn't need to be set up for anything. He's Superman, but you want to really enable him as much as you possibly can and have some pass rush on the other side. And then you got to look at the secondary. I mean, I think the biggest red flag of this game was Jalen Ramsey. I don't know if Jalen Ramsey is the best corner in football anymore. And how good Jalen Ramsey is moving forward. Jamar Chase really burned him pretty badly. And so you're asking, so how good is Jalen Ramsey against elite wide receivers? I don't know. And even if you assume that he's still Jalen Ramsey, what is around him is mediocre at best. And so if this is sort of, you have to really assess defense here in terms of what the Rams need to do next, which is why I'm so surprised that, they lost an all-time, all-decade player like Von Miller and decided to say, hey, let's go and, have another receiver that we don't need just because we can. And sort of the marginal value here. I worry a little bit here, guys. Clayton Christensen is a very famous professor, Harvard Business School, and he has sort of this theory of disruption. And his theory of disruption is that organizations, sports teams, institutions, they are most susceptible to disruption right after they've achieved success and they're sort of taking the victory lap of success and sort of patting themselves on the back as sort of an incumbent. And that's when others sort of come in and eat their lunch. And I worry a little bit that that's sort of what's happening a little bit. I mean, I'm going to give folks the benefit of the doubt of what's happening the rest of the offseason, but between the management and between fans kind of just saying, hey, I don't really understand it, but I'm going to shut off my brain and I'm going to sort of shut off, my ability to analyze things. And I'm just going to believe that Les Snead is going to do things. And I'm just going to believe the Rams are going to do things. I mean, those are the same folks that are sort of gambling with blockchain because they don't really understand the tech, but they've got, there's sort of a herd mentality there. So I don't really understand any of these arguments. None of them are credible to me. As a standalone trade, as a standalone acquisition, as a standalone transaction, this was terrible. Now, if this is an enabler to go do other things, then that we will see. But as Ryan Anderson said, we're not going to play the if game. But as a standalone transaction, this was terrible. And anyone that says otherwise is just a total homer with no objectivity whatsoever.
Yeah. I guess I come down on the side of it is that I do trust, and I do think that this front office and this brass has made really good decisions. They've had a winning team over the last 5 seasons now. 5 seasons, yeah. Yeah, and that's impressive, and that's something that pre-McVay was not happening. So the team that they've built over those years.
Does that mean it's Les Snead or does that mean it's McVay?
I think it's obviously a combination. You got to have if you look at
McVay says who he wants.
Building, yeah. If you
McVay says, "Go get me this guy, make it happen."
Yeah.
What was Les Snead before McVay, and what was McVay before Les Snead? That's a fun game to play.
Oh, yeah. There's no argument there. There's no argument there.
Not really.
So,
Les
Snead is sort of getting a lot quickly that has come his way, and more power to him, and he should cash in on that brand and cash in on those chips. But these sort of Les Snead disciples and whatever Les Snead does is gold. It's a little quick, a little fast, guys. That's how Ponzi schemes are built. When you get that kind of credibility.
We're talking 5 seasons. We're talking 5 seasons of a track record of success
with the guy who kind of knows how to coach football.
But that's GMs, and I think that's GMs in general. I mean, look, when Seattle went on their run with Legion and Boone and won, John Schneider was hailed as the greatest GM in football, and since then he's done absolutely nothing. He basically rode the coattails of having Russell Wilson as his quarterback. There was a time when Thomas Dimitroff down in Atlanta was considered what he built with Matt Ryan and the coaching staff there, Dan Quinn and Kyle Shanahan, the greatest thing. And 2 years after their run, he's fired out of a job. So I think GMs in general get these quick fixes that they climb the ladder and everyone hails them as the best ever. But unless your name's probably Bill Belichick, I mean, there's really not many GMs I think you can really put your hat on as these great GMs unless they've had a great quarterback their whole time. So I think why I look at Les in a more positive light is that they've done it successfully for 5 years so differently every year. Like it's basically just like reset. And it's so different than the status quo of what the NFL is. Now we'll see if that striking the iron while it's hot ends up getting cold very soon and ends up blowing up in their faces at some point. But yeah, and it helps having a guy like Sean McVay, to your point. And absolutely. And if he were to retire this year, this would be a whole different conversation. Absolutely.
I think he knows a little bit more about coaching football than you give him credit for. I mean, he turned around a pretty awful team into a winning football team, into a playoff team, and he made Jared Goff look like a credible quarterback there for a little while. So I think Sean McVay has done a fantastic job. I mean, every coach has their foibles and drawbacks to them. There's no perfect head coach out there.
No, we're on the same page there. We're saying Les Snead is benefiting from the greatness that is Sean McVay. So
okay. Well, I took issue with Jamal saying that he kind of knows how to coach football, and I think
Ryan. I'm the guy's basically a genius. I mean, so it's one thing to sort of be Les Snead and say I have a vision of the football team, and it's another thing Les Snead being Sean McVay's chief of staff. Okay, and when Sean McVay says, go get me player X, go get me player Y, and he goes and executes and makes that happen, I think, well, that's great. He's an executor. He's making it happen. But I think you have to be objective about when things are great and when things are not great. And I want the Rams. I want the Rams to win the Super Bowl every year. I want the Rams to win 10 consecutive Super Bowls. I want the Rams to be at the top of the mountain place forever. But why we are a great network at LA Football Network is because we are objective and we have to sort of call bad things just like we call good things. Otherwise, we might as well get our pom-poms and just be cheerleaders on the sideline. But we're a football network. And so I don't agree with what happened today. But if it's an enabler for something moving forward, let's see it. But as a standalone transaction, this was pretty bad.
Yeah. Yeah, it's funny. I was talking to, I think it was Jordan Rodriguez a while back, and she had said that just kind of playing up how important Sean McVay is in this whole thing. When there is when there needs to be approval for something, or when someone needs to talk to the owner, Stan Kroenke, it's not Les Snead that goes to Stan Kroenke. It's Sean McVay that goes to Stan Kroenke. So I think that tells you all you need to know who's really the boss when it comes down to it in Ramsland. So. But we'll see, man. I mean, if they are able to get, Stephon Gilmore or one of these, I mean, how would you feel about that? Like a premier corner that's still available, Stephon Gilmore or a Patrick Peterson or one of those veteran corners.
Peterson, Stephon Gilmore, Honey Badger. I mean, I think that there's some opportunities in the secondary. That would be really terrific and an opportunity to really get better. I mean, I think again, it's. Yeah, okay, Allen Robinson, you trade Woods, and who knows what's going to happen with OBJ. OBJ probably ends up in Green Bay. I mean, the way things have sort of transpired moving forward. But it's 6 of one, half a dozen of the other. Okay, Stafford prefers, potentially Allen Robinson more than Woods, but you've got Jefferson locked in, you've got Kupp locked in. It's all very incremental kind of thinking. And so what you need to significantly get better really on all three levels of the defense, truthfully. And so I would like to see some emphasis on that side of the ball. And I'd like to see Les Snead, sort of push back on McVay and say, you're the offensive genius. We've kind of given you all the toys now. Can I kind of spend at least 2 hours of my job looking at the other side of the field? I mean, and I sort of like to see a little bit more of that moving forward.
Yeah. Well, I mean, they're going to certainly have to. And, because they have 8 draft picks, but obviously those aren't going to be necessarily day one starters where they're drafting. Those are draft and develop guys. So it'll be interesting. I mean, it's obviously our job's not done. They're going to do something. I'm sure something crazy is going to happen here. Before we get out of here, guys, we got to talk about, because it affects the Chargers, we got to talk about this Davante Adams trade from Green Bay to the Raiders. Now, I mean, there's AFC West. Oh, can you remember a division that is this loaded right now than what the AFC West is?
No,
I can't.
What do you guys think of the trade? I mean, do you think okay, let me say this first. Because on the surface, it's like, what is Green Bay doing? Like, obviously, but it came out after the trade that the Packers knew, at the Packers brass and Davante Adams and his agents had basically said he's not playing under the tag. So they knew, Aaron Rodgers knew before he signed his deal that Adams was gone. He already knew he was gone. He signed his deal. So there's a lot of talk afterwards, like, oh, what kind of fit is Rodgers going to throw? Is he going to want out now? He knew already. So then it's like, okay, so the Packers know this. They have to get something. good for, Adams, had leverage. He used it to his advantage. So now they're able to get another first round pick. I believe they got a first, a second, and maybe some players to be named or something. So now they can use that first round pick. They have 2 ones. They can use it for one of these elite receivers in this draft. It's a great receiving draft class. So it doesn't seem as bad after you peel the layers back. But that being said, Jamal, I'll start with you. What do you think of the trade, and what does it, in your opinion, mean for the Chargers? The Chargers have had a great free agency, but now they have Russell Wilson with the Broncos. They got Davante Adams with the Raiders. What does it mean for them?
Ryan, I think it's a great move. I think it was sort of a win-win on both sides, truthfully, from sort of a GM perspective for the Packers, and then for sort of obviously the Raiders. I think, there's been so much in the media the last couple of days on this argument of like who's the best quarterback in the AFC West, and folks are kind of going back and forth, and there's a lot of passionate arguments, a lot of very controversial arguments. But the one thing we as a nation can kind of come together on is that Derek Carr is the worst quarterback in the AFC West.
Yeah.
And the argument really starts with the other 3 and how you rack and stack them. Yeah. And so I think they realized that, look, man, we got to do something on the other side of this line of verticality to really compete with these great quarterbacks in the AFC West. I think it makes for all of these teams 6 very difficult games every regular season. And I think it's really compelling for the fans. And this is the most competitive, dynamic division that I can remember. And so I think from an organizational perspective, I think it was win-win. I think the Packers needed to do things sort of financially. But where I am sort of flabbergasted is the enigma that is Aaron Rodgers. I mean, when you sort of sit there and say, I don't want to rebuild, I want to bring everybody back, I'm 38, 39 years old, I want to be contending. And then you sort of turn around and say, okay, if you give me $50 million, I'll stay. And then it turns out that, hey, maybe some of that money could have been used for Adams. What is the message you're sending there? Just as sort of the face of the franchise that, I want to win, but I only want to win when it's convenient for me. And so this just adds another layer of complexity to who Aaron Rodgers really is. One of the 3 to 5 most talented players to ever play quarterback. Mm-hmm. But you got to wonder above the shoulders what's really going on and why a guy that talented has 6 less rings than Tom Brady. And it's behaviors like this that sort of indicate why.
Yeah, it's crazy. Before I kind of give my 2 cents too, Ryan, what do you think of the trade and thoughts on what it means for the Chargers?
Well, it's such a classic Raiders move. It seems like they're overpaying. It seems like this isn't going to work out. Derek Carr's got he's on last year of his contract. There's trade talks going on with him too. We don't know what the future is. They're overpaying for Max Crosby now. If you're Davante, you go from one of the best quarterbacks ever to Derek Carr, and that's not a great career move. Like we'll see what he's going to be a good receiver still, but I mean it's just such a Raiders move, and when Raiders make Raiders decision, that's a good thing for the Chargers.
Yeah, it's interesting because, I think Davante, obviously they both played college at Fresno State. Touche Fresno State for getting these guys in the league, and now they're playing together, making money. They bought a house next to each other in Vegas, so they're neighbors. But you look at the contract, and again, we don't know the exact cap hits per year, but it averages out to almost $30 million a year for a receiver who arguably is the best receiver. I'd say you can argue him, Cooper Kupp, Deebo Samuel. You can have an argument with a few of these guys. Arguably, he's top 3, 100%. But how much value do you put at that for that contract figure? And this is one of those contracts where you have to look at Tony Pastores and Les Snead and say, they finally got one right getting ahead of the game, because Cooper Kupp this year has an $18 million cap hit versus 30 for Davante Adams, and next year also has an $18 million cap hit, and the following year it drops to 12. So this contract for Cooper Kupp, it seems like the best contract in all of sports compared to what Davante Adams has. If you're the Chargers, you are thanking God you got JC Jackson in free agency, because now you got to go up against Davante Adams, you go up against Tyreek Hill, and you go up against whoever you want to call the number one in Denver, Cortland Sutton or Jerry Jeudy or Tim Patrick. And, it's a good thing the Chargers got Khalil Mack and JC Jackson and short up that defense. It's honestly from a coverage point, but also just from a fan, I think it's going to be so fun to cover the NFC West and the AFC West. Obviously, the Rams are a blast to cover and what they do, and they won the Super Bowl. But the Chargers being in this AFC West that, let's be real. I think the Raiders right now are the bottom of the division, but it wouldn't shock me if they won the division. I think anyone can win it, right? That's how good all these teams are.
Ryan, Skinny T, you said it so well, so eloquently, sort of Raiders making Raiders moves, but and I never thought I would string these words together in the history of my life, but let me defend the Raiders for a second, in the sense, not necessarily sort of defending the move, but almost sort of, posing it to you guys, like, what do? You have 3 of the best 8 quarterbacks in football in your division. The concentration of talent in this division is insane. There's only 8 guys really in the world that can play at an elite level, and 3 of them are in your division. And the other 5 guys contractually and whatever are locked up. What do? Do you just wave the white flag and say, well, that's just going to be 6 losses in the division, and we hope we're going to win 85% of our non-divisional games and try and be a contender? Like, you have to do something. And granted, you've overpaid. Granted, it's a big splash move, but you got to basically say, look, to have a passing game, you need someone to throw it, you need someone to catch it. Well, we're clearly beat on the guy who's throwing it, and there's nothing we can do about that. So let's at least try on the other end. I think at least it's commendable that they're willing to get into the fight. Now, they're probably bringing a sword to a gunfight at this point, but at least they're willing to get it. What else do you do?
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yeah.
Great point, Jamal. Let me ask you this, Jamal, since you do the draft in session pod, you know the draft so well, better than me. Ryan knows the draft great too, but you guys both know better than me. In your opinion, just your opinion, obviously we know how good Davante Adams is in draft capital and draft players. There's so much unknown. But with how talented this receiver class is, do you think it may have been wiser for the Raiders to say, you know what? We're giving up capital to get Adams anyway. What if we give up capital to move up in the draft and just take one of these star receivers? Do you think that would have been smarter? Or do you think getting the commodity that is known is the better play?
I go known commodity on this one. I think that's the right move.
Yeah, no, I agree. It's a risky play, because you've got Jameson Williams, who's an absolute stud, but, he tore up his knee in that SEC championship game, and you got to kind of see, to sort of try and compete with the Mahomes and the Herberts and the Russell Wilsons and putting all your eggs in a kid who's dynamic at his best, but, you got to see the rehab a little bit. And that only leaves Olave as a true game changer based on the prospects. And so, there's an argument to be made that you could be trading, capital to move up in the draft and still probably miss out on Olave. And then you're really in a tough spot, and Olave may or may not pan out. So I think this is probably the best of the alternatives. But, as Raider fans should be proud that, your organization's willing to, get in there. They don't have any ammo. They don't have the guns. They're bringing the swords and they're bringing, the fight. And we'll see what happens.
Hey, they are pirates at heart, right? So they got to bring the swords and the eye patches.
It's like the knight in Monty Python's Holy Grail. He's going to fight the kneecaps. He's going to fight to the end. That's what they're going to look like.
Anytime we can get a Monty Python reference, it's a good show. It's a good show. Oh, man. Well, gentlemen, this was fun. Anything else you want to touch on before we close this out? We didn't talk too much Chargers because we've covered them all week and they didn't make any really moves the last 2 days. So obviously Rams centric with the Robinson. So anything else you guys want to?
Good or bad? I don't know what's going to happen with this Allen Robinson thing, but I'm really glad that I get something to talk about that isn't offensive line, Brian Allen. Like, this is much more exciting than that sort of thing.
It's fun. And then you guys can bring me on and tar and feather me in a public square, So
yes.
Hey, you held your own. You did a good job.
Look at Dirty Chai dumping in the
so
look at Dirty Chai jumping in the chat there.
Legends.
There he is. Okay, last thing I do want to mention. Because I didn't realize because the contract just came out for Brian Allen. And so just if me and Ryan were buttering up Tony Pastors, because he's the one that handles the money. It came out, so his contract was like a 3-year deal, $18 million. His cap hit this year is, so it's basically a 3-year, $18 million extension, $10 million guaranteed, 2022 cap hit of $1.8 million. So I was like, all right, touche. That's some wizardry right there, however they got that done. But anyway, we'll see what that turns into. Because yes, okay, let's go with this. Let's just go around the table real quick, and then we'll end it with this. The biggest thing that needs to happen, you can give one name, one word answer. You can go long if you want. Biggest thing that the Rams need to do to turn their free agency from, we'll call it a D, like Jamal, from a D to a B. I'll start. They got to go secondary. It has to be in the corner, or safety. Even, hey, Tyrann Mathieu, he's out there. If they can get a guy like Tyrann Mathieu, that's huge. But for me, a corner, whether it's Patrick Peterson, whether it's Stephon Gilmore, whether it's, I know Rasul Douglas, there's reports that the Packers are going to re-sign him now that they have money because releasing Davante Adams. But if the Rams can get into play for that, I know there's talks about Zadarius Smith and these other edge rushers, but for me, it's the secondary. Jamal, we'll go to you next.
Hands down. Second. I second that all the way. And whether you need to sort of parlay one of these receivers to be able to do that, or do it through a straight acquisition, absolutely. No question about it.
Skinny T?
I'm going pass rusher. I don't know why. I flipped earlier today to quarterback. I was like, yeah, that's what they got to do. And now I'm back. I was
be the heel, baby.
Flip-flopping back. And, I was thinking about it. The pass rush is the proactive side of the defense. And I like betting on proactive football more than reactive football. So.
Great stuff.
But the Rams always do the opposite of whatever I think is the way to go.
So maybe you actually think cornerback, but you're going to say pass rush because then they'll sign a quarterback.
Yeah.
We'll get a DB in there. So, gentlemen, this was fun. Two of the best. Jamal, thank you so much. Appreciate the honesty, because I know we don't agree, but hey, this is fantastic and I love it. Ryan, thank you as always. These guys are two of the best, two of my best friends out there. Jamal, Draft is in Session podcast. Writes UCLA stuff. He does so much with the network. Also does the Bruin Bible with Will a bunch. Ryan, Rams beat writer, obviously on the show a bunch here with me. So thank you guys. Thank you all for tuning in. But guys, have a good night. Appreciate you as always.
Thanks so much.
Thanks so much.